Hi, everybody. I hope you're doing well, that you're happy and healthy and having a wonderful weekend. I have been working on my video, my story, my shack, the second part that I wanted to share with you, and it has not been easy, to say the least. It's like evening time now, and I've been doing this all day. I've been working really hard, and things are just not coming together. I did do one video that was over an hour long, almost an hour and a half to be precise, and in reviewing it, more than halfway through, an hour into it, my video was all messed up, and again, my picture was going crazy. It was like going super fast, and it was like just all messed up. And when I was like, okay, I wasn't sure about that video anyway. And that was like Papa's way with me asking him, should I put this one out or not? It was a definite no. And I had my doubts anyway. So that was my answer. So I'm going to try this again. This is it. I swear, this is it. Okay? I will just throw it away for tonight if this doesn't work. I'm not doing it. No way. Putting my foot down on this one. Okay, so let me try this again. So yeah, you know how Papa always asks me, how do I do this, right? And he always refers me back to my last video. And so I really had a hard time to do that. I really pushed it off to begin with anyway. I didn't want to feel what I did, but I eventually could see how hard it was for me to start, and I wasn't listening to him, and it wasn't working because I wasn't listening to him. So anyways, I had to do it. So I finally listened. So sorry, Papa. Anyway, let's start with a prayer like I always do. Thanking Papa, God, our angels, spirit guides, and for guiding us, protecting us, loving us every day on our journey. And thank you for helping me channel these messages for all of you today. Thank you so very much. All right. So, yeah. I didn't know how to start this, right? So I meditated, and I meditated, and I meditated, and I meditated so much that I'm so sick and tired of meditating. So, yeah. So I'm going to probably be a little bit goofy right now because I have a headache, and it's not working. So I kind of get like that. I kind of I giggle when I'm tired sometimes. So instead, it's better than yelling and screaming, right? Would you guys agree? I think you would. I don't think you want to see that. So anyway, so like Papa always does, right? He makes me feel what I'm going into. And I started off my day working, cleaning, taking care of my beautiful fur babies that always make me feel good, and more working. So anyway, I think you got the picture right by now. I was working, and that's kind of where I was going into this next video. Again, Papa's lightening this up a little for me, which is really beautiful. And thank you, I appreciate it. But that's where I was. I buried myself in work to help deal with what I was going through. But let's start with loss, okay? Let's talk about loss. So what do you do, right? What do you do when you've experienced such a major loss? I lost my entire life at this point when I lost my kids. They were my life. And how do you cope with that? How do you get through that? How do you overcome that? How do you heal from that, right? I didn't know how, and I still had all those other woundings that I still needed to figure out how to deal with. So I had so much feeling, so much it was so heavy. It was so heavy to carry. And I felt all those emotions, like in that video where Papa's message, and he brought in the movie The Shack, where the character was feeling the anger, the bitterness, the sadness, depression, anxiety, hopelessness. I felt it all. I had it all. So, and those are normal feelings, right? When you go through tragedy, trauma, loss, like this. So the normal thing, right, is the healthy way, is that you need to find what the support system to help you through it. Usually you have people around you, family, your friends, and they are there to help you through your dark moments in your life, right? So I unfortunately didn't have that, but that's what you would want to do, just to say, find those support systems and even counseling, which I, again, did not do. At this point, I gave up totally. I did. I gave up. I pushed everyone away, that if I could even get help, I wouldn't have accepted it at this point. No. Honestly, I wanted nothing to do with anybody. I wanted to just hide. I wanted to crawl up in a ball and disappear. And I was so upset and I was mad. Why would God even let this happen? And of course, He doesn't. He doesn't let it happen, right? But again, I didn't have that close relationship with Him, and I didn't understand what I know now as being my journey, right? And I grew, and how it actually helped me grow. And why He allowed it to happen was, and how it ultimately it made me stronger, right? So that's it. When you go through losses, you have to feel it, right? Like I said, to heal it, and you have to get your support systems in place, and you have to get really healthy coping skills until you get to the other side. So fake it till you make it is real, and I did. I basically faked everything. I didn't. The first year, I actually pushed all those emotions aside, and I wouldn't allow myself to feel any of it. Wrong, bad, no, just don't ever do that. If I can give you advice, don't ever do that, because it just gets uglier. Those emotions get bigger, and then there comes the anger, the resentment, right? And then if you're not someone who lashes out at people, which I didn't, I got more depressed, more anxious, more isolated. I isolated myself from people totally. Wouldn't live. I just would not. I lost the will to want to live life, and I had nothing made me happy. Nothing. I found no enjoyment in things that used to make me happy. So that was really, really, really rough. So this is my darkness. This is my dark night of the soul. I went through years and years of darkness, and that's what I'm going to share with you now. I know I had let my emotions get the best of me on my last video, and I'm going to not do that this time. But I'm human, and it was my pain, and so this is all real, right? And I'm being real, right? That's what we want to be. And so I want to just say that first of all. Okay. So first, my relationship with my partner, he was still there with me at that point again, right? And his boys were for a little while, but then they wanted to, their mother was still very much in their life, and they wanted to go and live with her ultimately. So they did. They went and left. And then I had the relationship with my partner was very surface level. We weren't going deep at all with anything anymore. We didn't grow emotionally anymore. We didn't communicate well. But and one thing, unhealthy behavior that I brought into it again is feeling so much rejection, so much pain, so much loss and everything. I became so insecure again, right? It just got more, just those, everything, just all of the feelings that I had and all the problems I already had just escalated and got bigger. It became this huge mountain from a hill to a huge mountain, and that's the best way right now I can describe it. And so my codependency problem just worsened as well, because now you have to again put yourself where I was, where I had no support system at all, other than speaking to a couple of my siblings on very rare occasions, very little bit, just a little bit, did I do that. So so I felt like I had to cling on to him for dear life. Can imagine I felt so alone. But you know what? I was still alone, even in a relationship, even by clinging on to him like I did, thinking that it was going to make me feel better. It didn't. I still felt, like I said, really alone, because we didn't have a healthy relationship, and you can't give up people what they don't have, right? And with what he had to go through in his own life experiences, his own woundings, he wasn't able to show up for me that way anyway. But I was upset that, and again, I was angry towards him too, because I felt that because he couldn't do that for me again, right? You can't do that. You can't expect somebody to be your everything, right? And to heal you. That's your job to do. But I didn't know, and I was really lost. I was lost and alone and afraid. And so I had faith in God, but I really didn't. I was really even angry at the world. I was angry at him. I was angry at everyone that was left in my life for things. I couldn't see things clearly. I was in the dark, right? In the dark. And it just got darker. So now what happened, right? So I lost, and I continued to lose. It didn't stop there at all. I kind of feel like this video, I've been trying to do it over and over again. It took me so many tries to get to even this one, and that's what I felt like I'm doing. I'm starting my life over and over and over and over again, so it was big. It was a lot to deal with, to say the least. Anyway, so now what am I facing? So I had to deal with the legal aspect of the kids now going to live with their father and them having custody of them. So I was in such a low place, and I pretty much did give up. I felt so hopeless that whatever that they wanted in the order for visitations, I just agreed to it all. I didn't have the strength anymore at this point. It was so low, and that's reality, right? That's sometimes you just don't, and that's okay. And sometimes you just need time, right? And then with the support systems until you can get the strength. But you just have to keep going. The way I had to go and do it is I had to do it one day at a time, even more, 1 hour at a time, to 1 minute at a time, to even 1 second at a time. So, just focus on surviving, on getting getting through it. I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel, and this was going to be years of all this. So anyway, so I agreed to all that, right? And then to what they wanted. And now I had to pay a lot out for child support. And I had, again, many years of that ahead of me to deal with. So, and they go by the highest amount that you make. And I did that really well that year, right? Like I told you. So, yeah. So I had quite the financial hardship on my hands, and my mortgage loan was already set up so that was going to go up even more by the end of that year. And then my job, right? I was working at that inpatient rehab hospital, and there was another rehab facility not far that it's very huge. It has a wonderful reputation, and we had internal issues develop over time at this facility I was working at, that we were changing administration, CEOs, a lot of that. And so with the competition and with all that, I lost my job. They closed the door on us again. So I had job loss after job loss happen, and then I ultimately did lose my home because I couldn't maintain. I couldn't afford it. I couldn't anymore. So yeah. So yeah, and then with the court order, they had it, my kid's dad had it so that I could only have the children with me, basically, or I think an approved sitter, and not with my partner. So with finances being an issue, and work being an issue, I literally, they went to their dads and just never came back. They never came back home. So I didn't see them for 2 years, about 2 years after that, before I could. So it was really hard for me. It was yeah, a low place. It was dark. It was yeah. So I didn't, right? I ignored it. I ignored my feelings, and I pretended. That's what I did. I pretended that none of it happened, and that wasn't healthy at all. But I kept going like that for about a year, and then we decided, my partner and I, to get married, and so we did, and then I had to also, we weren't able to stay in one place. We couldn't live in one place for very long. The longest we did was 4 years, and that was right about the time that we were married, is we rented this farmhouse. And we were there for 4 years anyway. And what was really great and I had very few healthy coping mechanisms at this point in my life, but one of them was that I really loved animals, right? So this farmhouse was a blessing in disguise for me, because my husband and I now created this little farm, a little farmette, right? So I had, and that was breeding them too. So I was able to see life happen, and that helped balance the hospice side as well for me. So I had to deal with death, but I also saw the life. So that was a healthy balance. And God again was there. I didn't see it then, but He put that into my life, and that was really helping me in huge ways, more than one way. So it kept me going. It was one of the things that kept me going, right? It was something that I could again, service was really good for me. and I could help and I could nurture the animals and I could help people in my job in hospice ultimately. Because again, right, I before even going to hospice, I ended up going to a skilled nursing facility, but that didn't last more than 6 months. There was a lot going on in that facility that wasn't good, and I was really concerned about. And that's where they introduced me to hospice. And it's kind of beautiful though in a way, because I could look back and see how my journey in my work life to being who I am and being into hospice, and how I grew as a person and my gifts started to develop through my work and how he took me there. So, he brought me to that rehab facility, right? Like I told you, and I was starting to realize that I was very good at comforting people, even if it was just from pain medication, and from their injuries, making sure they were comfortable physically to emotionally, where I would be there holding their hand, I'd wipe away their tears, be a listening ear, to going into hospice and even going in deeper into that now, and and I also was really, I was amazed actually that I did my best work, really at my worst times in my life. And, and I know now, I didn't see it then again, but I know now that why is because, I was in this really low place myself, feeling depression, anxiety, very so low, right? My self-esteem, my confidence, feeling all this grief myself from my losses. I could really relate. It really was humbling. And as a person, and I could really relate that way with other people, so that, and I already had a lot of empathy for people. But like I was saying before, right, it's not the same when you've gone through it yourself. So I firsthand, I could do that better, and I was able to show up even more so in bigger ways because of that reason. I could put myself in their shoes. I felt their pain. So yeah, again, I didn't see it then, and I always wondered about that, right? And so okay, so that was a little bit more about my work life at that point. So the farm was really good for me that way. But financially, we were really struggling. And like I said, I had my house, and ultimately I could not afford to keep it anymore. So I didn't lose it. I had to sell it. And again, everything I worked for, so hard for, I lost. I felt like a failure again. I felt, again, rejection. I felt all that just harder, just even more intensely. And, going into this so unhealthy into my other relationship, and we both were adding more trauma and more wounding than what we already had, right? So here we go again. Not good. Just got harder. Yeah. And here I'm thinking, it's okay. It'll all work out. But no, it doesn't just go away, and it'll go away over time. No, it doesn't. Not without doing the work. Again, we didn't know how, didn't. And so along with all that, I was starting to feel guilt and shame. Like, doubting myself. I must have did something wrong, right? I was super hard on myself. So I was really going through it. So I was getting low vibrational again. So what happened, right? Everything just crashed around me, and I attracted more of the negative stuff, because I was very thinking negatively. And again, I was in a bad place. I didn't have help. I didn't have the support system. I did the best that I could with what I had with me. But this is all part of my journey. I had to learn, right? And I did. But it took me years. It took me years of going through it, really going through it hard. Yeah. I was going through all these feelings, betrayal, and I felt not good enough again. Never good enough. Like my best is never good enough. I'd cry. I have moments, even at my farm, where I would just fall to the ground. I'm cleaning out the stalls. I had horses, miniature horses, and I was like, I tried everything I could. I did everything I could. I put everyone first, and why did it not? Why was that never enough, right? So I cried out to Papa. I did. And again, I felt so low that I felt at times that I did want to give up. I wanted to end my life, and I can see how people feel that way. But I had so much love. I had still so much love, and I still kept the hope as much as I possibly could that things would end up turning around for me. God did put that feeling in my heart that eventually He would right on my wrongs, and the kids would see, as time went on, what really went on. And I just tried to live my best life. So, in the best way, the only way that I knew how. And, so when I did see them, right, when I finally did get to have my visit with them, it wasn't very long because, again, I was financially struggling. My husband was financially struggling, and he was having problems as well, financially. So, my credit was totally crashed too. Everything I lost everything. I lost all my stability again too, right? But again, I lost my life when I lost my kids. And so when I did have them, I really, really wanted it to be really quality times with them. So, and I wanted us to be a family, but my husband was really bitter and really angry. See, that's how he was dealing with it. I was depressed. He was really angry, right? Bad. So, So when my kids came, he was already angry, bitter, and it showed. And I felt, being protective mother, that I would wanted to protect them from them seeing him angry. And but it didn't work. So it wasn't fun. I tried to make them happy, and I tried to buy them things when I could, and do things that they would enjoy doing, and try to do things as a whole family even with my husband, so he wouldn't feel left out. But it wasn't working like that. He was very closed off, too angry. So I felt cheated again. So even when my time I had with them, which were very few and far in between, so they were really, I couldn't enjoy them. We couldn't enjoy our time together. And then, so when I would do something good and fun for them, or I'd buy them things, I bought them chickens, baby chickens, because I had a farm, so I used what I had to try to make things good and happy for them. So I shared that with them, I tried my best. But so they would, but their father's side, so their father would call, right? And they would, his family, but his father would call, and they would be on the phone checking on them, and frequently, and it was hard because whenever I would do something for the kids, like get them something, then they would be sending them things in the mail. And, whenever they were sharing the fun things that we did, then they would be saying things like, well, when you get home, we'll be doing this, we'll be doing that. So they really didn't want me to, they didn't really want, it was competition. That's what it was. Yeah, they were competing, making sure that the kids didn't want to be with me more than with them. So anyway, yeah. And I went through a lot, So, yeah. So I didn't see them a whole lot anyway. And my husband and I got married, right? I told you that already. And then what happened is that I did eventually just totally shut myself down, not getting the help that I needed, and I wouldn't let anybody in. I didn't trust anyone, right? So, and I financially couldn't even get help, even if I wanted to, because I didn't have the resources for it. And his family wasn't. First, they were somewhat supportive, right? And then, as time went on, there was jealousy with his sister, his father, his brother, his sister's husband. I treated everybody the same, but they just didn't like me for being who I was, and there was jealousy there too. And, I was a nurse, and his sister and his sister-in-law wanted to be one too, and they didn't. And so anyway, I ended up losing that relationship as well. So again, I was married but alone. I had no one to turn to, and my own family after a while, and everybody just went their own way, and I literally went years and years where nobody even knew if I was dead or alive. No. So, yeah, because nobody was in my life. There was nobody there. And then even eventually then, one of my sisters, when she reconnected with my parents later, she went against me as well. So, yeah. So I was really literally all by myself, all alone through it. And my saving grace was still keeping my relationship with Papa, with God, and I had to lean on Him. And then having my farm, and then my hospice co-workers, they were really another blessing, right? I said God gives us the people that we need, not always what we want, but what we need. And that was another thing He did, is that He gave me these beautiful, supportive people who had these beautiful gifts of comforting others in their worst moments, and they were just as much there and present we were there and present for each other, for one thing, right? And they did that for me, which I really appreciate every one of you for doing what you did for me, and you were there for me. You let me cry on your shoulder many times, and I value you all so very much, and what you did to me, you helped me in my darkest days. So again, thank you so much for that. And yeah, so I worked, right? And I worked. I never did anything I enjoyed, and I couldn't afford it either. And financially, I was totally ruined. And again, I was so low in that point that I really I didn't have the motivation to grow and strive for things like my job to grow anymore in that either. I was still present, and I did the best that I could, and I was but that ambition, I lost it. I didn't see. When you're so depressed like that, right? You don't see anything. It's hard to even just get up in the morning. Every day is a battle. It's hard. So, yeah. Nothing made me happy. Everything that did make me happy, the little that I did enjoy, I really didn't have any. It didn't do that anymore for me. So, yeah. So I lost opportunities that I could have had to grow again, and I just kept myself small. That's what it did. It made me small, And my inner child just came back out again, and I just dimmed my light, and yeah. So I worked, right, like I said, and I focused on just getting through every day, and I worked on the farm, and my husband tried. He did at the beginning. He did say things like, just to see you smile. He would do these things for me, like help me with the farm. We really worked hard on making it what it became. I worked hard on working on making it feel like home. I really needed that. That was the other thing that was healthy. Is that whatever made me feel safe or comfortable was very important. So what I did have for finances, I put into making home feel like my safe place right at that point too. So, and that was okay, that was good. And my health, I would exercise, right? And that's good, right? Because what does it do? It's healthy, right? For one, and it increases your vibration, your energy, right? And that's good. It helps you, keeps you going when you're in these low places. So again, those were good coping skills that I did have, and that's really what kept me literally going. Yeah. So my relationship with my husband slowly deteriorated, right? Because again, when you can't communicate and you can't be there for each other emotionally, the marriage, the relationship just dissolves. It does. You need to strengthen it. You need that connection, that bond, and we didn't have it. We didn't. We were suffering in silence with our own wounds, our own issues at that point, separately, even under the same roof. But we did what we could, what we know how, what we knew how. And yeah. So lo and behold, we were blessed with our son, and I adopted him. And I felt that was my second chance of becoming a mother again. So that was really huge. Now I I always prayed. I never wanted to replace my kids, and I always prayed that my kids would come back to me, and that's what I wanted. But again, that wasn't possible. That wasn't part of my journey, right? I didn't get that at this point. But God ultimately did give me something that I really needed. And then I also, again, how does he work? He doesn't just help you, he helps other people, right? And there was this beautiful little baby boy that needed me. So I was blessed to be his mom again. So I did adopt him. I did find out later that through going through his adoption from lawyers, and I had no idea about this in the time that I went through what I did with my kids, that again, because I didn't know law at all, right? I know nothing about law. And the lawyer, once I did share my story with her, the lawyer that was one of the lawyers I went to go see to get this adoption to go through, and she told me, wow, she said, you know what? She said, Louise, I wish that I was there. This was sad, right? She's like, I wish I was there at that time because there was no way that they had no jurisdiction over the kids because they were residents of this state at this point. So they had no jurisdiction, so we could have gone in there and gotten them out and brought them back to you, and they would have had to come to this state, which was Pennsylvania, and fight for custody at that point. And again, you know, I didn't know, and I didn't have the resources. Yeah. So that was like a bittersweet thing right there, right? Because, yeah, it was it was great to know that. Anyway, even though I didn't have it with me, for me, available to me at the time. So anyway, at first I adopted this beautiful baby boy, right? And the first couple of years, it was good. Again, I focused on nurturing him, and I had my farm and I had my job, and that's what I focused on. But I did have to, again, material stuff, it didn't matter anyway to me, so I lost it all, even though I worked, you know, but that wasn't the most important thing to me. So, you know, I sold I had a Camaro that I really liked. I sold it. It was paid off, you know, and I sold it so that I could pay for the adoption of my son. And, yeah, so we welcomed this beautiful little baby into our life. And, like I said, it was okay for the first couple of years. And, again, at that point, with my husband and I, there's no intimacy whatsoever for a couple of years at all. We were shut down totally even to each other at this point. So, but again, that didn't matter to me. I was a very committed, loyal person, and I was, you know, when things got tough, I wasn't someone who would just, you know, just walk away easily. It would have to be a good reason for it. And, yeah. So I'm in it because I love hard, and I'm not afraid to do the work either. So, I tried, but you can't make it work alone either, right? It takes two people. And anyway, so, yeah, so the first couple years, life with my son and my job and my farm, it kept me going. It really did. It was my saving grace and my coworkers. But I remember, remember this time when I actually I had the kids again for another summer after my son was adopted, and they were able to meet him. He was a couple of months old. That was a really beautiful thing. I wanted my family all together, right? And, but again, they weren't able to stay with me for very long. And, that was hard. Again, because again, finances. And again, at the time, we had adopted this beautiful baby boy, and my husband had lost his job again, right? So here we're constantly losing. Why, right? Because we're not healthy either. We're not. So we're not, how can good things come into our life when we are ourselves not in a healthy place? It doesn't work that way either. So, but it's not all of that, of course, right? It isn't. We did our best, and the circumstances happened that way as well. And, you know, just, yeah, it didn't work out anyway. So I went, so again, we struggled again. Here we are again, financially, right? Blah, blah, gone. No good, no. It's all gone, right? It's just bad. So the times that I had on my kids, again, was very short-lived. Again, very limited periods of time. And I couldn't even take them places I wanted to enjoy our time together because we just didn't have the money. So we were stuck on the farm, and I made the best of it that I could with the farm to make them try to have a good time, at least when they're with me, right? Good memories. So, but it was pretty bad. It was stressful because now my kids have been away from me for a few years, right? And we don't see much of each other. And you know what that does? It takes a toll on them, right? Just as much as it did me, right? Probably even, I'm thinking even worse for kids, right? It does, it is. So, yeah. So one of my children was really stressing right from the beginning of the visit and kept counting down the days, saying, oh my gosh, Mom, only this many more days left, and then I have to leave, and then I won't see you again for a long time. And it was really making my child so upset. I'm not going to say again who it is. I'm going to protect them as much as I can. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail either of things because of that reason, but so it was so bad that I was at work and he just broke out in hives from anxiety he was having. So I had to leave work and take him to an urgent care, and they had to put him on steroids. So this is how bad that it affects kids, you know? And so when I told his father, they were about that, they were like, oh, it had to be the laundry detergent, you know, that you were using, which wasn't at all, because I was sensitive as well, my skin. So I had like no non-scented, it was all like non-perfume type of detergent for sensitive skin, right? And I had been using it before and it never bothered my child. So so I always tried to like express my worries and my concerns, and I couldn't help them, so nobody would listen to me. And then at this point as well, again, years go by, but every attempt that I would make to communicate with their father, he would shut down totally. And then he refused to do that with me. And then instead, his partner, who later became his wife, was the one. And that wasn't right. She should not have been. That was not her place. It should have been myself and my husband, my ex-husband. It wasn't her place anyway. And yeah. So I would get these letters, from her, and I knew it was her from her handwriting. I knew my ex's handwriting, and again, finances were tough, and I was always, again, getting these letters, and you're behind on this, you're behind on that much money, and so I was really stressed. I had a lot of pressure on me, and my PTSD was really bad when all of it happened as well. I was just like waiting, and I felt like I was waiting for always the next attack. I was always looking over my shoulder because I had so much pressure in every area in my life, to deal with, and everything I was trying to handle emotionally. So it was physically, it was emotionally, it was all that, right? And yeah, so anyway, going back to that visit, so my child would be counting down the days, and I was super anxious. And then I'm just going to bring up this one incident because it was so traumatic, and just so you have an idea of what I was like and what I was going through, what they were going through. So now my parents had moved back to that area where the kid's dad were, and they were involved in their life, right? And they were friends with my ex and his wife, and we had no contact anymore. So they had arranged with my ex-husband for my parents to come pick up the kids. I went to pick them up for the visit, and then they were going to I was going to meet them at a restaurant in the area, and they were going to take him home, drive him home. So that day was horrible. My child was so upset. He was screaming, and didn't want to go back because he wouldn't see me again for so long, right? And I had to be strong for him. So, and I was, I wouldn't let him see how it affected me, but yeah. But he didn't want to go, and he didn't want to go. So what happened was my father called my ex-husband, who then, my father gave me the phone, and my ex-husband was on the phone yelling at me and saying, just throw him in the car and just walk away. Or he threatened to call the police and call the cops, get them involved. So I had to do that, which was so horrible, and it was quite a scene. And while he was screaming, I could see him in the window, in the back seat, just his hands and his face up against the window, and crying as he was driving away. So that did it, and I broke down. And my husband was with me, and he saw that and was so upset that he, and angry, that he ran up to the car, was yelling at my father. So that was just horrible. It was just terrible. And so that's how it went. And then I had to go home. My husband had to go back to work. And I was like, I couldn't sit like this. I had to do something. So I called a lawyer. He had a good reputation. He was a lawyer for over 25 years. And I called him for a consultation. What can I do? So I did try, more than once, but I always was met with resistance and left with no hope, because they would say, like he said, your parents, because they were against you on this, because of what they did, that ultimately it would be very, very difficult for you to take this to trial, to court, and to win, and it would be very expensive. So I was left with really little to no hope at all. I had nothing, and I had no more money. I had nothing. I literally had nothing, and no one. So then what did I do? So I reached out to DCYF, and I said, I told him what happened, and I said, you have to go, and you have to help me with this, that my kids are going to suffer emotionally. And, they were like, yes, sorry, ma'am, they will, but we can't do anything. We can't help you. And they'll have to, when they're older, they'll have to take care of it and get some help then. So again, I was left with nothing, right? Yeah. So again, it was a really, really hard, dark time in my life, and I felt like I just had nowhere to turn. I never did, right? So again, my marriage wasn't good anymore either, and as that started to deteriorate, his woundings were coming out as well, and then it came out, and it was, he didn't like women, right, because of the trauma he suffered when he was a child with his own mom and with his first wife that he never healed. So now here I have a child that I'm raising, right, with him, and by around 2 years old, it's when things started to get really bad with us, because I would try to teach my son, healthy ways of being and rearing him, and in a healthy way, of course. Like, for example, I'm going to use this one example, like, I would try and introduce him to healthy foods, and he wouldn't want to eat it. So I would say, try it. And my husband would see that as being not fair and cruel. And so he would started to get angry with me and put it out on me. And he actually totally left our relationship and what we had. as a couple, and he went instead, clung to my son, and they became like best friends, basically. So that's not healthy either, right? Because you need to be a parent. You need to raise them and everything. You can be friends with them, but that comes later. But it was really friends. It was in every level, you know. So he was, again, so behaviors were coming out emotionally. It was the emotional abuse, the mental abuse towards me. My bond with my son started to get weaker, because he would even say things in front of my son, you know, like putting me down in front of him and making it look like I didn't even want him. You know, he would say some really cruel things, so which weren't even true. So so he basically pulled him away from me. So emotionally, my relationship with my son started to break down again, and I started to feel again I felt that was my second chance in life to be a mom, and I felt again I was cheated. I was being robbed from all that. So I got, you know, it was really hard, and it was making me so upset, and even worse, you know. So yeah, that's what I was facing, right? This point. And then my husband became ill, physically ill. He was diagnosed with a tumor, a brain tumor. And so I was, you know, trying really hard to put all of our differences aside because he was sick and he needed me. And my husband didn't know anything about the medical field at all. So, and I did. So he was, luckily he trusted me with his life, and I became his advocate. I would talk to all of his doctors. He had some really amazing doctors over at the University of Pennsylvania Hospital in Philadelphia. And so I was trying to really be there for him and help him that way again. So I put any kind of need that I had aside and tried to help him at that point. And he wasn't well. He was sick, so he was struggling again with work. So he wasn't working much, and that was again falling on my shoulders. But I was trying so hard to be so supportive of him, and I didn't want him to feel bad. And I would tell him, I'm like, it's okay, you know, and that's what you do, right? I had his back, no matter what I went through. I was trying to have his back. So I said, don't worry about it, we'll get through it. And I tried to see the positive of it all, right? And he already had enough on his plate, and I didn't want to put him through any more than he already had to go through again. So, yeah. And so now I was dealing with illness, physical and mental and everything, all this, you know. So my problems just got worse and worse and worse. I was so depressed though, really. I tried not to show it to anybody as much as I could. Now my friends saw it at work, you know, because they were really all I had, and they were easy for me to let down my guard in a way. And so I remember going to the chaplain one time, right? Because I'm feeling really hopeless again. I'm trying not to, but it's hard. I'm human. We all are, you know. And but I was at one healthy thing again I want to point out is I was reaching out, right? I did reach out to some people when I really needed to. And again, I was like, I told her, I remember telling her, I said, I feel, why would God not help me? Why would God, not understanding, why would God allow this to even happen, right? And so I told her, I said, I felt like I was a sacrificial lamb, and I really did. You know, I felt like my whole life was just sacrificed, and everybody had what they wanted, and I didn't. That's how it felt like to be in my shoes, you know? And it was hard to see any good. It was. I was so depressed again, I didn't get to see my kids grow up very much. And again, my visits were very, again, few and far in between, right? And I couldn't, it was so painful. I couldn't even have pictures of them out. So I went years and years without having their photos out. Communication with them was hard. When I would try to talk to them on the phone, it was never a private phone call. I could hear on the other end, the phone clicking, and so I could never have any personal relationship to try to build that up. And really, literally, there was, I don't know if you're familiar with parental alienation. They weren't allowed to be in my life. And I remember being told things, again, I'm not going to go into details, but they were punished. There was one time I was aware of, and I have to say it, for wanting me. And they weren't even allowed to have photos of me. And the phone, I did buy them a track phone, and I tried to have communication with them, keep that open, and they were using the phone as punishment when they weren't doing what they should and not allowing me to communicate with the kids. So again, right, all this control, all this stuff, and they just weren't allowed to have a relationship with me, and it wasn't okay, right? And then again, so the little bit that I did have communication with my sibling, I found out later on that through my sibling that my parents and my ex-husband's side of the family, they were destroying my reputation in my hometown. They were saying that I abandoned the kids. They were saying that I chose a man over them. So they made me look like a monster. They made me look like I was this horrible person, right? And that was just wrong. That can destroy someone's life, right? And I had a good reputation. We were in a small town, and yeah. So, I'm feeling like now I felt like everyone else would see me in this way too. So I felt more beaten down, more, I was even lower, brought down even lower. So, So every day was a struggle, right? And when you go through depression, it's not easy. It isn't. And literally, you have to live in the moment, right, to get through the days. Sometimes you take it one day to day, 1 day at a time, to 1 hour at a time, to 1 minute at a time, to even 1 second at a time sometimes, really, literally. So, And again, I couldn't go in counseling even if I wanted to. I didn't have health insurance at some point, at times, and again, my finances were bad, right? I couldn't afford it. I just couldn't. So I thought about it a lot. I thought about many times. I thought how easy it would be for me just to end it all, right? And again, that's really, I'm human, and I'm happy I didn't do it. And you're never alone, right? But I didn't know that at this point, right? But I felt so alone, and but I decided to, turn to God, and I talked to Him, and I'd have many nights where I wouldn't show my emotion in front of my husband. I was like a robot, basically, I would just operate day to day, on this survival mode, just to get through the day, So my nights I'd cry, it's when I would talk to Papa, and I didn't talk to him that way yet, but I would just cry, and I would beg for him for his mercy. I'd beg for him to help me, help me. And I couldn't see the way. I asked for help me find my way out of this. Now, so I'd cry. my pillow was full of tear stains. You know, that's how much I cried. Like I said, my husband wasn't well, so we were dealing with that as well. And then again, with everything that he was going on physically, mentally, emotionally, his behaviors became worse, much, much worse. And they were all geared towards me. They were all directed towards me because I was right? I was triggering him very easily anyway because I'm a woman. And now I'm playing a mother role in the relationship. And that just made those triggers even worse for him, right? So the abuse became more severe, and I went years, not days, but years, where I was felt like I was unsafe. I really wasn't safe, and again, all towards me. It wasn't geared towards my son. I had a really strong relationship, and he was very protective of my son, of our son. So, but I could tell you details, but it was really bad. It was so bad that I had to call 911. Because my life was being threatened, right? And it was so bad that they did have to put him into a psychiatric unit, and they kept him there, right? And I remember the psychiatrist calling me and saying, after a few days, they took him off of all the medications to treat his tumor medically, which again, these medications had very rare side effects, but they were still side effects of aggression. So it was affecting him that way, right? So I was seeing all this aggression towards me, So they were telling me, my husband did share with me one thing, that with his sessions with the psychiatrist while he was there, he was saying, well, why were you doing that? Why did you do that? Like basically being, threatening me the way he did. And he was saying, because I wanted to get her attention. And the psychiatrist said, well, you did that all right, And again, see, we were all both so broken people, See, it was just like so unhealthy, right? Oh my gosh, right? So So now it's gotten, this is really severe. So they were reaching the social worker, the doctors were reaching out to me when they needed to release him, and they were asking me if I felt safe, right? And I said, well, you got him off the medication and his behaviors were stabilized, right? And they said yes, and I said, okay, well, the plan is that we needed to now not medically manage the tumor, which we felt was a real big factor in all this, but he now needed to have surgery. So that's where we went with all that. He was discharged from the hospital, and we went right back to the University of Pennsylvania, and I really was an advocate to go through surgery. So it was a really difficult experience for him, and again, I had a whole lot on my plate. I had all the responsibilities financially, right? And he was out of work, he was sick. So, and again, we had to move a lot at this point because we just had difficulties financially, and we had no stability whatsoever, right? No support systems. Like, again, his family wasn't supportive either, and he was angrier again because now he has no one either. And we couldn't be there for each other because we weren't able to show up that way. So see what that looks like, right? Not good, right? Yeah. So so eventually what happened, right? So I went to work and I worked and I continued being a hospice nurse, right? And then I had that experience while my husband was sick and going through what he was, that's when I told you about that prophet, right? That prophet, those 3 prophets that came in and started speaking to me, which was really like so amazing that it even happened, but at all. But see, God again was showing me, he's starting to, he was making himself present in my life. Again, I couldn't see it very much yet again, but I was slowly seeing him more and more, right? And he showed up to me in a big way right there with those prophets. So they went to go visit this woman that I was taking care of, and after the visit, they stopped and talked to me. So one of them started talking to me, and they started to say to me, he started to say to me, you're looking for a car. You need a new car. And I did. I actually needed a car, a new vehicle at this point. Car. Sorry, I can't talk. Here I go, right? I'm talking for so long now, right? So it's really, it's getting tougher here. And I've been doing this all day, don't forget, right? So anyway, and so I did, and I've been praying to Papa, saying, how am I going to do this? Our vehicle that we did have was our only vehicle, and it was old, and I didn't have money, and I couldn't get loans anymore at this point because my credit was so bad, and my husband not being able to work very much, and again, so all the responsibility financially on my shoulders. So I was praying, and then again I was starting to have all these doubts, right, about now time has gone by, years and years, right, and I'm like, well, maybe this was all my fault, maybe, this was, what happened with my kids. That's what happens, right? You get all this doubt creeping in, and it gets worse. So this prophet started to say to me, he goes, you're looking for a car. I'm like, well, I do need one, right? And then he said, God wants to bless you with one, and not a used one, a new one. And I was like, whoa, what's going on, right? What's happening? So the other prophet jumps in and he says, oh, I'm sorry. He does this all the time, right? He does this all the time. And I'm like, oh, it's okay. I've been waiting for something like this to happen. I wanted to let him talk. So he did, and he said, he wants to bless you with a new car. He said it again, and he said it's local. You're gonna get this somewhere local. And I'm like, well, can you help me? Tell me more. How do I even begin? So I go, start looking now. And he said, Bob. So he gave me that name. I'm like, okay, what? Bob. All right, Bob. What's that? Right? What's that about? So how am I gonna find Bob? Right? That's what I'm thinking. And then so anyway. So I can tell you that did happen. It did. I went home and I called. I had this letter on my counter, on my kitchen counter for a couple of weeks that's saying I'm pre-approved, right, for all this money, which is not real, right? But at a local car dealership. So I said, well, he said local, so I'm going to try this place. So I called, right? I called, and then so I spoke to this really nice gentleman, and he said to me, so, what are you looking for? I said, I don't know. I was honest, I don't know, right? He goes, okay. He goes, well, when you can bring your husband in after work, ask for Bob. Okay, no kidding. Again, this is what, he said, Bob, again. So my face is like, what? Bob, here's Bob. So I called my husband. I said, you won't believe what happened. He already knew the story, what the prophet said. And I said, he said his name was Bob. So we did. We rushed over there after work, after he got out of work, and we met Bob. So lo and behold, we walked out that day with a brand new Chrysler 200, and it wasn't even in my loan. My loan, it was under my husband, who didn't have proof of employment because he was working part-time and under the table. And here was a miracle, right? Here's the miracle. It came to pass, what the prophet said. And even more of a blessing was that we had delays in the paperwork, right? So we didn't have payments, our payments kept being pushed back, deferred, and then they offered us another loan that would give us lower payments for a longer period of time and insurance on the vehicle. And so we went over 6 months without even putting a payment on the vehicle, which was such a big blessing. There you go. God gave us what we needed, right? Another example. And he did. It did happen. So going back to the prophets, right? So there were 3 of them. So after that happened, one of the other ones jumped in and he was like, oh my God, your heart, you have such a beautiful heart. Your heart is so beautiful. He kept saying that. And I didn't know. I'm like, okay, what's happening? What's going on? Is everything okay, right? And again, I didn't know they were prophets, but he's like, he basically told me, because again, right, I started doubting myself, and I was being really hard on myself. I was my worst enemy, and I was starting to think, well, maybe this was my fault. What happened with my kids, right? And then he said to me right away, he goes, it wasn't your fault what happened to you, right? And I broke down and started crying, right? Because it was what I needed to hear. And then he said, so then it got really serious, and then he said, you hear Papa, you hear God. God speaks to you and you hear him, right? And I go, yes, I do. Yes, I do. And by then, I had been really, really, really leaning hard on God, right? I had no one else. And I was talking to him, and like I'd have my conversations with him at night like I always did, and I would cry, right? And I would ask him for help, and what would he do? So I'd see like things would happen, like lights would flash, and so I would be like, oh, he heard me. I felt it. I could tell, right? And so I would hang on to that hope. That's what I did. So anything I could see positive, I started to really cling on to it. And so that's what the prophet said. I said, so I do. Yes, I do. He said, I know. He said, he's very pleased. As hard as it's been, you've done the best that you could, and you tried to remain hopeful the best that you could. And now he says, God is going to bless you. What's going to happen in your life and what's coming in your life it's your time. He's going to bless you for staying faithful, right? And and then he started to say things like, you're going to help a lot of people, right? And I'm like, yeah, well, I already am, right? I'm a nurse. I'm thinking I'm doing that part, right, as a nurse. But he was acting like this is future. He's like, you're going to help a lot of people with depression, anxiety. And he was like so excited. And it was amazing anyway. So after that happened, I did go see the patient, and she said to me, she said who they were. And she says, I believe that they didn't come here for me. It sounded like they needed to give you this message today, right? So that was like, that was just amazing. Yeah, I really needed that. And God was there. He showed up for me. So anyway, I told the chaplain that was on that day what happened, right? And my coworkers, and so that's when he said the prayer. He said, let's pray. It sounds like you have a mission coming up, right? And so he prayed over me and with me. And so that was really beautiful. But I still, I was still in the struggle. It was still really difficult. And now years were going by, right? Then I hadn't seen the kids. And and again, now the kids are growing up. I'm missing everything. I'm missing all their milestones, right? And I actually stayed away from social media until I think it was 2012, because the whole idea, the whole thing of just seeing them happy somewhere else without me was torture again for me, right? And that it was bittersweet. I wanted that. I wanted them happy. Don't get me wrong. But it was super painful for me, right? So I did what I had to do to, I couldn't do it. So, but once I did, but then I finally, once I was, getting a little stronger, I did it, I faced it. So that's what you do, right? That's the healthy thing to do too, is not run from it, is to face it, right? Meet it head on, feel it to heal it, right? So, so I started a little bit, right? But that was again, my faith was getting a little bit stronger now because, I was seeing a lot of things happening that showed me that God was there and that He was with me and I wasn't alone. Now, so I wasn't yet done yet, right? So again, the kids were not in my life and now they're getting to be teenagers, right? And the more distance that is between us, right? And time, that the further we grow apart, right? Just the way it is, right? Unfortunately. And they had their own life to develop, and I get that. And then they had their emotions to work through as well. Like they had a lot of anger issues too, right, towards me. I had a lot of that to deal with when I did a little bit that I did deal with. And I understand why, and that's, of course, right? They had a lot of things where, not good things were being said about me, of course, so eventually it does. It takes over, right? That's how you're going to perceive everything in a bad way, right? And you're going to believe it, right? Anyway. So, yeah, that was rough. So at this point, right, my husband was becoming medically stable, right? And, but our relationship was done. He totally shut down on me too now at this point, and wasn't trusting of me anymore either, because we just had no more relationship, none at all. Yeah, that was really rough. And now I started to have some health issues too. Now, when you're under a lot of stress, your body will start to break down. So I started presenting with a lot of autoimmune disorders, a lot of autoimmune diseases. I had really severe endometriosis that I lived with for over a decade, and the pain and I had to live with was horrible. But I always pushed what I needed aside, because it always someone else needed, like my husband needed, and I had to take care of my kids. And I had all this financial pressure, again on my plate. So it became so bad anyway. And then I was having all the emotional, mental, and it then became physical abuse as well in that marriage. So when did I know that it was done, right? Well, it's when at that point there was no working on the relationship. It was totally dissolved, and there was nothing that was good about it. He didn't see me in a good light anymore. I couldn't even talk to him about anything. And super unhealthy. And I felt very unsafe, right? And I had medical problems too. So, luckily, then here it comes. Here's the year later, right? After the prophets, I get drawn deeper I get this pull to go deep and do some soul searching. Papa was bringing me in my awakening, like I told you about. And a big part of that was, in helping with that, was that I had this one friend I hadn't spoken to forever. And that friend had reached out, and I was able to talk to that friend a little bit. And that friend was telling me, was reminding me of my worth, right? And what I deserved. And that's what I needed to hear. Again, Papa put that person in my life at the right time and what I needed, right? So, then I pulled closer into God, and I started with my awakening, and He showed me more about how to love myself, right? What I was worth, that I deserved all that as well. So the healthier I became, the more aware I became of all that, the more awakened I was, and the healthier I was, it gave me more strength, right? And it gave me, So and then I was able to make better choices for myself, and I started to want more for myself, and I knew I was deserving of it as well, right? And again, it was totally unsafe for me at this point to be in this relationship too. So, and I had these health issues that I needed to take care of. So I had to now put myself in a position like my husband was in, where I needed help, and he wouldn't support me with that either. So I did what I had to do anyways, right? So I went through all my adult life, right? Really, in my 20s, my 30s, and early 40s, struggling with all this. It was a very dark place for me, and I was really, really struggling hard in every area of my life. Anyway, so that is really my darkness. That is really what it was like for me, right? And there's a lot more again, but I'm not gonna go into it that much. But so when I decided to get out of the marriage, right, I was starting to get pulled to come back to New Hampshire and start over here, and that was really strong. Papa was really putting that into my heart, and and at this point, my son that we adopted, our relationship, unfortunately, we didn't have a very close bond, but he did with his father, so I wasn't going to interfere with that anyways either, again, like with my other kids. I knew that just wasn't right, and I wasn't going to put him through that either. So I did what was best for his best interest, again, not mine, for him, that he needed and wanted to be with his father, and he was becoming old enough where he could say, so I wasn't going to interfere with that. And anyway, so that was it. That was really all of it right there. So, we're not alone, and I was never alone. And I found out that as time went on, and God, the closer I became to Papa, He was showing me that little bits and pieces, and that, that I kept the faith, and I kept the hope that, maybe one day my kids it would turn around, that I knew that, I didn't see it at the beginning, but I had to surrender, basically. I surrendered my life when I had my awakening too. I surrendered to God, I did. And I was, thank God, I put everything in His hands, that's all I could do anyhow, right? But that was big. I had to do that, and that was the right thing to do, because, and that's what He wants us to do. And He gave me hope that one day, with my kids once they became older, that I would still maybe be able to get that relationship back again, and that my family could come together again some way or another. So I hung on to that hope. I really did. And sometimes that's all you have, right? And that's okay. But just remember that, you have that hope. And so I didn't see it. I didn't see it then, but I did later on. I started to. And I found out, I really did, I found out just how strong I really was. And now I understand that by going through what I did, even though it was so hard as it was, is that it really helped me grow as a person. It did, like I said, it made me grow closer to God too, you know. And then I started to, through Papa, he started my healing process, you know, by showing me my childhood woundings, showing me that I'm lovable, right? And showing me my love, my self-love, and my self-care, and you know, that made me grow stronger and stronger every day, right? So again, if I can do it, you can do it. Because if you knew me back then, right, how I was, never would have thought I could have made it through it. But I needed God, and you know what else I needed? And God showed me that too, is I had to let go, like in The Shack, the movie, right? I had to let go of that anger, resentment, and wanting that, you know, revenge feeling, that justice, right? To have all my wrongs righted. But I gave it to Him to handle, right? I had to let Him, He would judge them, not me. It's not me to be the judge, right? So I had to come to terms with that. And I had to learn a big lesson too about me. I had to learn to forgive myself for not knowing any better. You know, forgive myself for not being healed. Know that I did the best that I did. Forgive myself and forgiving others. You know, so I wouldn't have to feel, because again, when you don't forgive, you carry all of this. You're imprisoned with all of this anger and all of this pain. And by forgiving, you're releasing it. You're releasing it and giving it back to God to handle instead of you. You don't deserve it. You deserve to be happy, right? So, so I was starting my journey now to healing, to self-love, to really knowing who I was for the first time in my life. And, and to God, growing that really personal relationship with Papa. So, So, I think that's where I'm going to end this. So, if you're still here, I know it says really long, and I'm hoping this video actually works this time, and not like the last one. But, but if you were able to stay with me this long, thank you very much. And I hope that you're able to take some of it, and, you know, it could help you in some way, like it did for me, you know? Never to give up hope, okay? Don't ever give up hope. It's never hopeless, even when you have nothing looks good in front of you. There always is something good that you can take out of it. There is, but you have to do the work again, right? It takes you to do the work. Yeah, so that's the way it is. And so anyway, thank you so very much again. And I will, again, leave you here for now. And I am sending you all my love, all my light. And I will see you again sometime soon, all right? Have a wonderful night. Love you guys. Bye.